Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're going to be taking another look at Darktide and looking at a different class, this time being the Zealot, the other class that I consider to be the frontliner, the one that's right in the mix of things, dealing damage while letting some of the other classes to pick off the important targets, etc. Now, like the Ogren video I did, and I talked about that class, I am just going to give you my thoughts on this class and talk about some of the other the experiences I've had playing the Zealot, as well as some of the other abilities I may not have used or I might have seen, things like that. Like last time, this is not some kind of guide. Like I don't do builds. Like I kind of just look at things that I think look fun. But I do want to just give my opinion on this class as a whole. And hopefully it at least might sound interesting to some people that are, looking to play the game and all that good stuff. So, the Zealot, I say it's a frontline class like the Ogren. That's because the Zealot is basically another, I see as like primarily focused on being a melee class. Has a ton of different melee weapons, has a ton of different guns as well. But fairly versatile with some different things you can do with the Zealot. But for me personally, to give you some kind of context, my Zealot was primarily attack damage, attack speed, and incoherency stuff in terms of like replenishing toughness. So the idea was he could last a long time in a fight. Had a fairly decent toughness, or at least toughness regen, increased melee damage, and I primarily played him as a melee fighter. That was kind of my goal with him. And then on top of that, having weapons and things around that, and abilities around that. But my particular version of my Zealot is definitely not what you would consider to be like a min-max style of build, right? Like I literally look at it and go, "Ooh, that sounds good, that sounds useful," and I kind of want it to like sort of support my team while in coherency, but also have some abilities that, like when we get onto it, like having Shroud of Fires, like a get out of jail free if things get a bit crazy. So let's get on to like how I built my Zealot guy. So off the bat, like I said, I went for like attack damage and increased, melee damage and increased toughness regen from like being around enemies, helping out the team by having a bigger coherency radiance, all that sort of stuff really. Those are all the dots on the trees. First thing that I came to was grenade wise is that I went with a stun storm grenade, so at least that's the upgraded version of the basic one. And essentially you chuck it and it's just like a flashbang. It stuns them for X amount of time. I think the upgraded version just has a bigger radius. I think I just went that way because the upgrades that I wanted on the tree were more like that. But I have found it to be fairly useful. Like a lot of grenades, I don't go for damage, and that's only because most other people do that, or other people have grenades that are effective for taking out certain targets, stuff like that. So I tend to go for like what I consider more support grenades. Except for the Ogren, which is boxer grenades, where it's going nuts with it. But the stun storm grenades, basically what it does, it blows up like a flashbang, stuns all the enemies, and allows you to basically wail on them without taking any damage. It's a good way you can just chuck it at your feet in the middle of a horde, and that will stun a bunch of enemies. If you see some guys like in a group, you can launch one at them and then run over while they're stunned and kill them. I quite like it. I think it's an effective grenade. The other grenades that the Zealot gets is the immolation grenade, which is basically you chuck it at your feet, there's fire everywhere, and it helps stun enemies as well, but it also does damage over time. And then the last thing they get, which is very unique to the class, is Blades of Faith, which is like a consecrated knife thing, and I think it's like a quick tap and you launch it at an enemy, and it's very good at like one-shotting enemies, taking out specialists, things like that. And you replenish that from, I think, getting certain kills and also from ammo packs, I think is how you get them back. Similar to the Ogren's Rock, but I think less effective against armored enemies. This is more for like, see a specialist, boom, right, kill him off, right, onto the next thing. To be honest, across the board, all three of those grenades or grenade types are actually pretty cool. I've not used them, but I've definitely seen a lot of the immolation grenade. My brother used that one when he built his Zealot originally, and I will say it's really handy because it sets everything on fire. I do wish the fire color was very different to the enemy's fire. Like, I wish it was like blue or something. But because it does a ton of damage in an area and it stuns most enemies, it's a really good way of just being like, I've got a safety net around me. So it's quite good for that. And the same with the Blades of Faith is more specialist, like killing certain targets, which is a totally fun way to play it from what I've seen. I don't see many people run with it, or at least I've not seen many people run with Blades of Faith. It seems mostly like the Immolation Grenade or the Stunstorm Grenade. So there's a nice balance. They're mostly support stuff. It's most like Stun and Immolation Grenade are kind of supporty, even though one does damage and one doesn't, but they have more of that, whereas Blades of Faith is much more targeted, which is cool. It's a good mix of choices there. I think all three of them seem pretty good. So one unique skill that I quite like that is actually in the tree of the Zealot is this thing called Until Death, which is fatal damage, doesn't actually kill you, and you get 5 seconds of invulnerability. You can then augment that skill by doing melee attacks and actually gaining back health, and it takes basically 2 minutes to recharge. And it's a really useful skill to have if you're playing like frontline fighter, because it means that if you do take damage that's going to kill you, the good thing is you've got a chance to continually whittle down that horde of enemies or the enemies in front of you, and then on top of that gain some of that health back. And with the way that I'm playing, it's not the worst thing in the world because I have buffs for having like wounds and stuff like that, which we'll get onto in a bit. But yeah, it's actually one of the few skills in the tree that I think really sticks out and is quite unique. A lot of the other stuff that you get is, you know, the usual stuff like, oh, gives more toughness regen or toughness damage, or you can do this, movement speed, sprint speed, extra wounds, all that sort of stuff. There's probably a few more unique ones on there, but I haven't built, like I said, I've only, pretty much every character I've played, I've only really made one build, except for the Ogre at this point where I've made 2. Going on from that then, we've got the auras, which I think are all pretty good as well. So the one that I personally like is Benediction, which is increased toughness damage reduction. I think it's by 15% while you and your allies are in coherency. Anything that helps out the allies by reducing toughness damage or increasing toughness for people, like, I like that. I think that's a lot of fun. It means you're actively helping your allies without having to do anything, and I really think that's cool things about auras. As long as you're near them, their toughness isn't going to go down nearly as much on top of whatever their own bonuses are. So like, you know, if you're an ally and someone's got this, if you've got a bunch of toughness, like if you're playing an ogre and it has a ton of toughness reduction, and then you also have you're next to a zealot that gives you this, oh my god, survivability just goes way up. So it's a really, really nice extra 15% to just protect you and your allies, basically. You then have Beacon of Purity, which is it heals corruption in current wounds to allies in coherency. This is very powerful. I think it's like every second it heals like X amount of corruption when you're near them. Very, very powerful. I can see this being really useful. It's kind of weird when you pick up a Grimoire and you see this happening, because it's obviously ticking down one way but ticking back up the other way because of the corruption. But I think this is actually a very powerful thing to have, just because like when you use a medikit rather than the med station, it doesn't heal corruption like a med station would. So having this while next to this dude, at least you can get rid of that corruption and then heal off of a medikit decently. So I think that wise it's very, very good. And then the last one is Loner, which is count as always in 2 coherency, which is interesting because that means that your toughness will always regen. Like it's I feel like this probably works really well with Shroudify, but this allows you to be a lot more of a character that's like, hey, I'm going to go off and deal with these things and fight on my own while you guys go and tackle this objective, whatever. You can make the Zealot very much this character that can hold its ground if built the right way and be an absolute bugger to kill, you know, which is awesome. It's a really cool idea. I've not tried it. I've only tried Benediction because again, I'm all about those toughness regens and toughness protection. I love that stuff because I'm like, well, I don't want my health to get hit. I want to be able to stay in battle and fight and help people, you know, that way. But again, I think these are really, really useful. It's not often that games get most of their skills, like, they're not all made equally. And these are all very different, and I think that's kind of what makes it like, oh, I can see a use for all of them. But ultimately, you stick reduction in toughness on there, I'm going to go for it. But I'm definitely thinking about going for a loner build and going for like high toughness regen and all that sort of stuff with loner. I think that would be kind of fun. Moving on, then we had the abilities. So I have different thoughts on these. So you have Fury of the Faithful, which basically causes your character to dash forward and then again a X amount of attack speed and crits. I think it's attack speed and yeah, your next melee attack crits, and you gain toughness, which is sounds good, and it is kind of good. But my only issue with this one is that I kept forgetting what it did, and I kept forgetting I had it, and compared to potentially the other abilities, I think this might be the weakest of the three. So the middle of all three of these is just Chorus of the Spiritual Fortitude, which gives your allies stun and invulnerability while it's active, while you're in coherency, I believe. And it also refills the toughness of allies around you up to 100, an extra 100 toughness if you're already max toughness. So this is really and truthfully, if you're playing like a Zealot that wants to help your allies stay in the fight, this is the one to take. Because I even though I haven't used it, my brother again, he went for this build and it was nuts. I was playing the Ogre a lot of the time, and I'd suddenly gain an extra bar of toughness. I just wouldn't die because of this ability, and the fact that it gives invulnerability and stun immunity while you're in it, and it also excuse me, also stuns the enemies. This is a very powerful ability. I think this is probably the most common one that I see, and it's probably up there in terms of like one of the best abilities that is on the Zealot, because it gives so much to your allies and it also stuns enemies, and that being able to crowd control like that and also then be like, here, have more toughness than you should actually be able to have is crazy. So very, very cool ability in that one. I went for Shroud of Fire. I like the ability to have a get out of jail free card for the most part. This doesn't work with monstrosities. I think they can still attack you while you're invisible. But what it does is you gain move speed, you gain crit damage, backstab damage, and finesse damage. And that basically allows you to go invisible for 3 seconds, walk up to someone from behind, whack them in the back, and essentially like one-shot a lot of things. If you have this ability when you're taking on a monstrosity with a finesse weapon as well, and you have the upgrades to do more, to do 50% more as well, you can do a ridiculous amount of damage with a heavy attack, and it's kind of nuts. I like it because it's like, I tend to forget most of it apart from the movement speed, but I like it. It's like, okay, I've got a swarm on me, I'm taking damage, okay, go invisible, let them all turn around, come out of it and start wailing on them again. And I really enjoy just having that ability to just be like, quick, I just need to get the enemies to turn around or get off me for a second so I can get into a better position. Really, really like that. I kind of went for like the upgrades that gives you 6 seconds of invisibility, because I think that's also really... I'll tell you what, this ability is very useful if you're trying to get up a downed ally, because you can go invisible, run in, as long as they're not in fire, and get them back up, you know, and get out or whatever. So rather than trying to fight off the hordes while they're dying, you can get in, get out, and then start chucking your weapons around and wailing on them. I also got the one that gives me toughness and... yeah, so basically, once you exit it, you gain, I think it's like up to 50% toughness over X amount of seconds, which I quite like. So you go invisible, you gain all that extra damage. As soon as you come out, your toughness starts to regen up to a certain point. Again, my builds are always like, how much toughness can I get? How much toughness regen? How much toughness reduction? And then the rest of my tree was like, oh, extra melee damage or attack speed. Things that were going to help me with my... melee choice. The one other ability that I did get on the tree, actually, that I think is worth talking about, is this ability that gives you, I think it's 10% increased sprint speed. While sprinting, you're counted as dodging. So I don't think anything can actually hit you. Like, I think that's correct. I'm not sure how it works. I think as long as you're running, you can't get hit by, like, back attacks and things like that. I think. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but I'm going to assume that... I think you get iframes on dodging attacks, so I'm guessing you get iframes on this by running and sprinting. I just like that. I like movement speed as well. That's something else I do enjoy, and this class does have stuff you can do for that. But, yeah, lastly, we have the keystones. So first off, you have Blazing Piety. This is 15% crit chance when you trigger Fury, and that Fury is triggered when there are 25 enemies around you within 25 meters that have died. So you just stand there and you and your allies wailing on stuff. Fury triggers, you get crit chance. Now you can start doing big damage to or you have a higher chance of doing big crit damage to whatever's around you. I haven't actually looked at the upgrades for this ability. This one actually, out of the 3 of them, didn't interest me personally. I've got a sneaky suspicion this is very powerful, plus with the upgrades around it, but it didn't interest me. I'm not really interested in crit damage. I feel like I do decent amount of damage and hit pretty hard for most enemies. Like, obviously, yes, if it does trigger, you are going to kill big boys a lot easier, but I didn't feel necessary. It wasn't really the build I was going for this, but I'm sure that this is very powerful if you're going for a lot of finesse, back attack, all that kind of stuff, really. Then we had Martyrdom, which is the one that I've taken, which is each missing wound grants 8% melee damage, and then you can augment it from there by having a variety of different things, essentially. I liked this because right before you get this, there's an thing on the tree, an upgrade on the tree that gives you +2 wounds. So I ended up having like 9 wounds in total or something, whatever it ends up being. This only works up to a maximum of 7 wounds, but it's really cool because it means that when you are lower on health, when that invulnerability thing triggers, where I've got like tons of wounds, I now can just hit for a silly amount of damage for those 5 seconds, trying to regain my health. I like the combo of those things. I think this is a really fun ability, and it's a very powerful ability if you've got the right upgrades, and that just leads to you, if you're playing a very heavy melee build anyway, like, that just leads to you just wailing on things and just killing everything in one shot, and I'm all for that. Especially if you've got a weapon with fairly big range, like the Crusher or the Eviscerator, which is the 2-handed sword. Awesome. Love it. And the last one is Inexorable, I think that's how you pronounce it, Judgment, which is grants momentum. Momentum is created every time you move. You can have a stack of 20 of them, and then when you hit an enemy while those stacks are building, that triggers them, and that gives you increased attack speed, melee attack speed, range attack speed, and damage. So now you can swing your weapon much faster, you can shoot your gun much faster, and you do more damage. And honestly, that sounds pretty fun as well. I haven't really looked into it. I think there's some cool upgrades around that one that makes it just absolutely bonkers, because you can go for more move speed on this class, which is cool. But overall, you know, before we get onto like the weapon choices that I use, I think overall the Zealot is a very versatile class for close combat. Even though the Zealot has a lot of choice for ranged weapons, I kind of just see this class as primarily a melee class, and you can kind of see that with the melee weapons you have. So you have different types of swords. You've got like heavy swords, you've got devil claw swords. I don't know how I feel about heavy swords. I've used them a few times. I don't think they're for me. I don't know whether they're good or bad. I just don't like their attacks. Devil claw sword, I think personally, is one of the most crazy weapons in the game. It's the only weapon you can parry, and when you parry an enemy hits you, you're pretty much guaranteed to like one-shot them. Doesn't always work on all the other enemies, but very, very powerful weapon. I don't see much drawback other than its light attack being quite weak. And I think that's really good on the Zealot. If you want to stay in the fight and you've got enemies around you, you can just keep mashing parry and doing a ton of damage to enemies that way. I really like axes on this class. I personally use the chain axe with the Zealot. I like the fact that the chain axe has just been buffed recently at the time of recording this video, meaning that when you strike enemies, the animation's over quicker, so you can use it more effectively. You can obviously rev up the axe and do some more damage, but it's axes in general, I think, work quite well on this class. I found that they've been my favourite place to use them. You've got chainsword, you've got the Eviscerator, which is the 2-handed chainsword as well. I think those are very good, very powerful. You've also got thunder hammers, which I think are unique to this class. I don't get on with thunder hammers, but I've got a feeling they're actually really powerful with the right builds and the right talents equipped to the weapon. One of them is very crowd clear, one of them is very much single target. I don't know. I don't know about thunder hammers. I've used them a couple of times. One of them, I think the one that's more crowd clear, I quite like, and I can see making a build around that. But I'm kind of on them. Like, I don't think they're amazing, but that's just from my experience of like the times I've used them. I've not gelled with them, so that's why I prefer like the Devil Claw Sword or the axes, because they're much faster. Though I do think the Crusher, which is similar to the Thunder Hammers and the Eviscerator, having that ability to just swing through massive amounts of enemies while you've got a lot of melee damage, I could see there being some pretty good builds, or potentially just ways of making that class feel like you're doing a ton of damage. There's also the Combat Blade, which is like a stealth stabby weapon. It's very fast. I don't like this weapon. It is super fast to use, but it's very low damage. So I don't really have much to say on the old combat blade. And then on the gun side of things, we've got the auto guns, all the different auto guns. We've got the las pistols, we've got the las guns, we've got the auto pistol, shotgun, stub revolver, flamer, bolter. There's a right old mix of guns there, which is great. You know, it's all very, very powerful. I personally, for the Zealot, like the shotguns and the stub revolver and the bolt gun. I think they're my favourites to use on this class, just because this class, when having at least with the shotgun, is a great way to just room clear a bunch of people in front of you. You can potentially just blast people away, get the old melee weapon back out and start slashing. The revolver's very powerful. They've just nerfed it a little bit, but I do like the fact that before you get into melee range, melee combat, all this stuff, if you've got the revolver, you can do some quite good sniping with it. I've also used an automatic auto gun. I do like that as well. I find that fairly decent to use with this class, but that's more just for me. I just like automatic guns. And then also the bolt gun, I think, is just crazy. It's a crazy fun weapon to use. Flamers, on the other hand, good support weapon. I don't personally like it. I've not got on with it. I just find it a bit way of doing it. Come on. Indent. Come on. And flamers as well, and not a gun that I personally get on with, but I can see it being useful. It's very much a support weapon, or you can spray fire, but it's a bit too stationary. If you could switch to your melee weapon quicker, I think I'd probably like it more, but it's not a gun I personally like, so I do like having high damage weapons on this class, just for that. I mean, obviously you can use the braced auto gun if you want a sort of room clear style. But I think the cool thing about the Zealot is there is a ton of options for this character for people to use and make. And I honestly, I think out of the two melee classes, I do prefer the Ogrin. But I think the Zealot is much more versatile in many ways. And I think there are potentially some crazy ways of building out this class. I personally, like I said at the beginning of this video, like to do the whole idea of having a lot of toughness, a lot of melee attack speed, and primarily play a melee style class with it. I think that you can do this quite well with the Zealot because you can just stay in the fight and have a ton of different, buffs to just have you there. Obviously that invulnerability, movement speed, extra wounds if you go for martyrdom, or you can go for just attack speed, just across the board, which is pretty nuts. And all in all, I do quite like the Zealot. I think the Zealot is one of those classes that when I play it, I'm like, oh yeah, there's some versatility here that I really enjoy. And I think most people, if you look through the tree and you get the right weapons, you can make a fun build across the board. I think this class has more choices than the Ogrin. The Ogrin's kind of there's 3 ways to play the Ogrin, or at least that's how I look at it. Whereas I think this class, you can probably do... You've still got the 3 branches of the tree, all the classes do, but I think you can alter those in more ways than you can with the Ogrin, basically. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the Zealot. I think the Zealot is a lot of fun. I actually think a lot of people should start with the Zealot. I think the Zealot ends up being, because you have so much choice there, I think it's a good class to start with. And just overall, just a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Not quite as high as the Ogrin for me, but that's just because the Ogrin's a massive tank character. This, however, though, there is some fun, the skills and abilities on this tree, and the amount of weapons you have at your disposal are pretty sweet. So, you can go ahead and have a fiddle around with the various combinations, and you're bound to find something that you like with this class. So yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts on the Zealot overall. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. I will be doing 2 more videos, obviously. One on the Veteran and one on the Psyker in time. Hopefully you guys will look forward to those as well. I have a lot to say on the Psyker, and I have a lot to say on the Veteran, to be fair, so you know, you can look forward to that. Anyway, that will do it for me today then. Thank you very much for watching, as always. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to see more content like this, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description, as always. And until next video, I will see you then.